Time pulse body drum embracing the frame. The frame drum consists of an animal, or increasingly nowadays synthetic skin, usually single but sometimes double-sided, stretched over a circular frame. Frame drums have been made and played across the world for many thousands of years. When it comes to frame drum playing, I'm a hobbyist, a work in progress. I play Middle Eastern style drums. I've just been playing one, 22-inch Remo. The sea or ocean drum, which I'll play a bit later, and the Irish Scots bodhran or bowron or boran. I have two main reasons for this. The first is to play along with music, mostly traditional Irish and Scottish. The second is to get out of my head and out of conventional time. This performance autoethnographic presentation is mostly, not exclusively, focused on the latter, getting out of my head and getting out of conventional time. My aim is to display and explore aspects of my relationship with frame drumming. This YouTube recording is unpolished, you'll have noticed, in both technological and aesthetic senses. Because I lack both the expertise and interest, I made minimal attempts to achieve filmic or virtuoso slickness. But thanks to my dear friend Susan Young for her valuable feedback on an early rehearsal. The film's made using a tripod mounted iPhone XR. My scientific interest has long focused on the relationship between frame drumming and neurological changes and meditative and trance states that those neurological changes subsume. Udo Will and Gabe Tarot, for example, discuss how these states, that's trance and meditative states, are reported across Tibetan Buddhist rites, Middle Eastern Sufi rituals, in Siberian, European and South American shamanic traditions, in Caribbean, Haitian ceremonies, in Christian and Jewish worship internationally. And the late Lane Redmond, great frame drumming player, claimed an ancient relationship between frame drumming and the divine feminine kind of spirit of feminism, which places the feminine and women at the foreground, at the centre of religious rites through history, ancient history in particular, Middle Eastern history. In more general secular terms, though, frame drumming benefits health. It has a repetitive mantra-like quality. Mantra repetition has been shown to be effective in reducing anxiety, inducing relaxation, lowering blood pressure, slowing respiration, and altering consciousness for the better. Lynn Hume, for example, asserts that drums promote shifts between inner and outer auditory perception, sounds moving in aural streams between foreground and background, between inner and outer soundscapes, between memory and the present, between music, language and noise. At a metaphysical level, I like to think, perhaps feel is a more appropriate word, of the frame drumbeat mantra as the pulse of the world. Stephen Halliwell describes Socrates' words in Plato's Republic. I quote, "Rhythm reaches into the interior of the soul and takes hold of it." Now these words resonate for me. When I embrace the frame drum and lose myself in it, I merge with it as a drum body. In a certain mystical sense, my drum body is connected to all other drum bodies and indeed to everything else in the pulse, soul and body of the world, in ways which are simultaneously diachronous and synchronous, or related to the past and present. With a nod to William Blake, Philip Pullman writes about connections via, in quotes, meanings that rhyme forever in every direction. These connections happen in what Trude Clevin and myself have previously described after J. Griffith as wild time. Wild time is located in a separate domain from conventional clock time. Wild time is the space of play, of loss of self, and mundane responsibilities. My drum body enables me to escape from conventional clock time into wild time. So, to summarise, I believe that the pulse and rhythm of my drum body conjoins with the pulse and rhythm of the world. My drum body is entangled with other human drum bodies over time, space and history. The frame drum is a meditative vehicle for enabling my drum body to be lost and absorbed into the body and soul of the world. That was a C drum. I have to lower the tripod a bit to next. Excuse me for the wax and technological. Yeah, that was the C drum. There's also an arguable panpsychist dimension to frame drumming. Panpsychism is the idea, that philosophical idea that the non-human material has, including organic material, so we're talking about not just sentient animals. It's well known that sentient animals have consciousness, but we're talking about trees, rocks, and even drums have some sort of consciousness. If you find the idea of a drum having a kind of consciousness convincing, I actually do to some extent, then you're kind of persuaded by panpsychism. In the novel The Painted Drum, which draws on North American First Nation metaphysics, Louise Erdrich writes, "The people who take their place at each site represent the spirits who sit at the four directions. A painted drum, especially, is considered a living thing and must be fed, as the spirits are fed, with tobacco and a glass of water set nearby, sometimes a plate of food. A drum is never to be placed on the ground or left alone, and it's always to be covered with a blanket or a quilt. Drums are known to cure and known to kill. They become one with their keeper. They are made for serious reasons by people who dream the details of their construction. No two are alike, but every drum is related to every other drum. They speak to one another, and they give their songs to humans." Gabriel Horn, White Deer of Autumn, writes, "In a universe wide as daylight and bright as starlight, there is the potential for unlimited possibilities and unimaginable diversity. This enables us to think and perceive ourselves in the world and the universe in a much more humble and open way, for the potential within us can only be limited by the way we allow ourselves to think. When you sit alone in your space of spirit drumming, you reconnect to that which connects you to all things. Some call it spirit and think of the collective spirit as the great spirit, the sum total of all spirit. For me, it's the incomprehensible something I learned to call the great holy mystery. The drum I beat upon, the beat I make with my drumstick, are all of the mystery. I am tapping that part of myself that is spirit, but the spirit does not belong to me. It is not my spirit. It's the spirit of the great mystery that exists within me, that exists in all things, and in which all things exist, unimaginable, indefinable." Actually, I'll lower the tripod a bit so you can see that. Bear with me. Hang on a sec. That's probably better. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm culturally and ethnically Scots-Irish, mostly. So it's not surprising that my first love among the frame drum family is the Bowron, or Boran, or Boron, if you're from the north of Ireland. Sometimes called the Bodran. I call it the Bowron. Of the Bowron in Ireland, Hart writes, prior to the 1950s, the Bowron featured prominently in processional rituals and harvest festivals, such as St. Stephen's Day, May Day, and St. Bridget's Day. The Bowron was used as part of the Wren Boys' processional ritual occurring on St. Stephen's Day, which is December the 26th. The Wren Boys, disguised in costumes and often with darkened faces, would go from house to house performing music on the tin whistle, the flute, the concertina, the fiddle, and the Bowron, to willing village hosts, where they would receive a small compensation for later potation or alcoholic drink. This processional ritual had its roots in ancient Celtic and Christian lore. Birds, particularly ravens and wrens, were viewed as liminal intermediaries capable of crossing between realms, between sky and earth, between earth and spirit world, and possessing divine powers. The Druids used the flights of these birds as auguries, meaning an omen or sign of what will happen in the future. John B. Keane's novel, The Bowron Makers, is set in rural Ireland in the 1950s. It's a story of the struggle between poverty-stricken, hard-living farmers trying to maintain their dignity and the Catholic Church. The narrative unfolds around the January celebration of Celtic ancestry in a festival of singing, drinking and music making with the Bowron. The revellers are confronted by the parish priest and his cohorts in the local village, who disapprove of the ancient rites on the grounds that they are immoral, drunken and degenerate. It's a story of the colonising dominance of the Catholic Church and its antipathy to residual lingering paganism, about the dying of the old traditions and the birth of modern Ireland, about the Irish diaspora of the 1950s, favouring the young of men and their families moving into England and other parts of the world. And it's about the Bowron as a symbol of resistance. The novel ends, young folk transplant easily, and after a short while will flower fully in distant places. Not so those who have matured in their native haunts. Donald knew from experience that he would sorely miss the dawns and the sunsets, the freedom of fields and boglands, the sound of the tiny rippling streams, the songbirds' chorus in the mornings, and the incomparable sense deep in one's being of belonging to a place. He knew that wherever he went, or however he might fare, he would always be part of what he was leaving. Last night, he turned to Bluenose, I secured the Bowron for you. I secured the Bowron you made for me to make sure it travels well. Bluenose smiled and slapped his thigh. It will remind us, he said proudly. Yes, Donald voiced his agreement. It will remind us. Now, Keane's words resonate with me. I come from the Irish diaspora from an earlier time on my father's side. My frame drums, my drum body, is a small act of resistance against colonisation, against narrative entrapment. An old chestnut of mine. Narrative entrapment or being written in a story about who I am or who I should be. It's a small act of resistance against growing old in England. I'm not interested in UK pensioner normative enculturation or terribly much about fitting in well in my communities. To borrow and paraphrase a line from my Facebook friend Johnny Saldana, it's okay not to be understood. Thank you. I hope you've got something out of this.